Hello there. I'm glad you're here. Welcome to this tutorial. My name is Dooley. I'm an assistant visiting professor at the College of St. Benedict and St. John's University. I am also a professional actor and director, and I've worked for 20 years in television, film, and stage acting. And I'm here today to talk to you about using your voice as a tool, creating a mellifluous podcast. There are some goals that I want to put forward before we begin this tutorial, and I've got my handy note cards here to remind me of what they are, and they are this. I want you to think intentionally about the way you use your voice. I want you to become more confident in your vocal production, and I want you to find your authentic voice. So those are the three goals that we're going to go forward into this podcast with the hope that the tools that I can give you will help you towards those things. So I want to lay out 4 things for your consideration as we begin this podcast. The first is verbal communication. Now that might seem the most obvious place to start. It's a podcast. You use your voice. You communicate verbally. But I want to start first talking about breath. It's very important that you support your voice with deep breathing. If you're nervous, if you're scared, tension comes into your body. And that tension will not allow you to take a deep breath, and therefore you will have more difficulty using your voice to its fullest potential. So before you hit record, I suggest that you do 2 minutes of relaxation exercises, maybe some breathing exercises, things to just calm you, prepare you before you begin using your voice to make a podcast. Now, there are 3 ways to manipulate your voice for this verbal communication. The first is volume. Now, the way that you speak to your friends, your family when you're out and about is probably the right kind of volume variety that you want for your podcast. But the thing that happens is when you have text of a podcast sitting in front of you and you're reading it, your vocal volume tends to flatten out. Things become a little bit even. And that will give your podcast a lack of variety. It will make the listener a little bit bored, and it will make you seem a little bit disinterested. So you want to have that kind of vocal variety in terms of volume that you would normally have when you're hanging out with friends, talking about the things that you talk about. The second aspect that you can manipulate is pitch. So we have a habitual range that we tend to use our voice in terms of pitch. We go up to a certain pitch, we go down to a certain pitch, depending on what we're talking about. But again, when we get excited, when we're engaged, when we are really passionate about something, we might go up in pitch, or if we're depressed, we're down, our pitch might drop down. And we want to include that realism in our podcast. We want that pitch variety to be a part of what we're communicating with our podcast. So that means you have to think a little bit more consciously about how you're using your voice when you're reading that speech, that podcast text that you've created. The third thing that you can manipulate is rhythm. And this might be the most difficult thing because we do it so subconsciously when we're just talking to friends. But when we're excited, when we're happy, when we're engaged, we talk more quickly. When we're nervous, when we're trying to process information that we've just been given, we might respond in a way that's slower. The rhythm is not as quick. We don't put words together as quickly. And that's communicating something about what's going on with us. And that is an important part of any podcast, that you're telling the story. So you can use pitch and volume and rhythm in conjunction to let us know when you're excited about something, when you're happy about something, when you've been surprised by something that you learned, and when there's something about your subject that maybe is not as appealing or interesting to you. The last thing I want to bring up with verbal communication is diction. Now, again, the way that most of us speak to friends and family, the diction we use is probably okay for your podcast. But if you know that you're a little bit sloppy, a little bit lazy with the way that you make sound, you might want to put a little thought into making sure that you're enunciating the words fully. And by that, I mean we tend to drop the ends of words when we speak to friends and family. Everybody knows what you meant. You don't have to put a lot of effort into doing the sounds at the ends of the words, right? So your podcast audience doesn't get to see you. They don't get that nonverbal communication. So you need to help them with your diction. You also want to listen to yourself and the text of your podcast. Probably record it a couple of times. And that first, second, third time you listen to your podcast, you're not going to like the sound of your voice. And it might even sound like you're a little cartoonish, you're a little over the top. I did what Professor Dooley asked me to do. I changed my pitch, I changed my volume, I moved my rhythms around, and it doesn't sound like me. The truth is it probably sounds like you on a good day, when you're engaged and interested and excited. And the more you listen to your voice, the more objective you can be about the sound of your voice. So then when you go back and edit that podcast, you can make choices about, oh, I see what I did here with my voice. I got quick because I was excited, but you know what? Now I can't understand what I'm saying there. So I need to go back, re-record that for technical reasons, not because you don't like the sound of your voice. Now, the second thing I want you to think about is nonverbal communication. Now, you might be thinking, wait a minute, this is a podcast. I don't have to worry about nonverbal communication. But that's not true, because the nonverbal communication that happens when you speak naturally to someone informs your verbal communication. We gesticulate, we move, we make facial gestures as we speak. That energy from my nonverbal communication goes into my voice. You would hear it across a microphone, across earphones. As you're listening to a podcast, you can tell if someone's engaged and excited and moving their body, right? Think about this. When you watch a voice actor who's recording voice for animation, they're always standing at a microphone. There's a reason for that. They are using their body and their nonverbal communication to act out the things they're talking about. Because they do that, that energy goes up into their voice. We hear it in their voice, and what it is that they're communicating becomes that much clearer. So I would suggest to you that you use a microphone up where you can stand and not sit at a desk, that you get your body engaged, you get your nonverbal communication engaged. There's a much better chance that ultimately we will understand what you're talking about because you have taken that energy and put it into your voice. The third thing I want to point out is emotional communication. Now, this might be the most difficult for a podcast, particularly if it's something that was assigned to you and you didn't choose that particular subject. What I would suggest is find something about that subject that interests you. If you can find some way into the subject matter that you can honestly talk about with some interest and some passion, that will be communicated to the audience. If you like what you're talking about, we can tell. If you don't like what you're talking about, we can also tell. So if you can find your passion for whatever it is you're talking about, that will come through the speaker and into our ear. And that is where you find your authentic voice, who you are. Because when we talk about things that we're really jazzed about, we're excited about, someone asks us about our favorite team, someone asks us about our favorite television show, we suddenly become very animated. Our body is animated, our voice is animated, and the listener is interested in what we're talking about. So the podcast voice that you want is the one of you when you're excited and passionate and authentically yourself. Now, the fourth thing I want to bring up is visualizing the listener. Now, this might be a little bit difficult at first if you don't have practice doing it. The more that you do podcasts, the easier this will be. But if you think about what your subject is and who you might be talking to, you can think about visualizing your mother, your roommate, your buddy from school, a teacher that's interested in this particular subject. If you can visualize them as you're talking about the subject, you will personalize the information you're talking about. It will not stay something that's very broad and general, but you're really making a point to this invisible person who just doesn't happen to be there at the time. The more you do that, the more that authentic voice will come through in your podcast, and we will be able to tell that this is really important, and the person you're saying this to is important enough to say it to. So visualizing your listener is the last tool that I want to lay out at your disposal. To recap what I've talked about, I've talked about 4 ways to use your voice as a tool for your podcast. We talked about verbal communication and how you can use pitch, volume, and rhythm and diction to create an interesting vocal landscape for your audience. We talked about nonverbal communication and using your body and your facial expressions to energize your voice. We talked about an emotional connection to the material to help you find that authentic voice where we can connect with your honest passion about a particular subject. And finally, visualizing the audience so that when you have this passion for this subject, it's being communicated to those people that are out there listening to what you have to say. I hope that this tutorial helps you on your podcast journey. Happy podcasting.